Welcome to another episode of Talking with Kevin and Son. This show that celebrates the voices of purpose, leadership, the love for community, presented by RMK Productions and the 10 United Podcast Network. Today, our sponsor is The Borough at 149 East Lancaster Avenue in Downingtown. I mean, fellas or people, if you have not had a great dining experience, this place is on three levels. One level is an upscale sports bar. The second level is sports dining. And then they have a sushi chef that thinks he's a martial arts expert. And then in the back of it, in the third level, they have live music and dancing. I'm telling you, just tell them you heard about this on the podcast, Talking with Kevin and Son. Say hello to my good friends, TJ O'Brien, Keith Crittenley, and my son that used to be the co-host for this show, Theo McLemore, who's the executive chef at the Borough at 149 East Lancaster Avenue in Downingtown, PA. Well, let me get to the real work here. Today, I am truly honored to sit down with someone who I can say is a friend. Her name carries both grace and greatness. The Honorable Leela Sharon Aheer. She is from Alberta, okay? From the halls of Alberta legislature to a global stage. My guest today has a journey that is one built on faith, courage, and her heart. As a minister of culture, multiculturalism, and the status of women, she has championed women empowerment. And in the arts and exclusivity, she has launched an initiative like Women's Entrepreneurship Day and the Clear Law, ensuring the protection of women all across Canada. She's a proud wife. She's the mother of two amazing young men, a professional singer, which we have something in common, a vocal coach. Maybe I'll get a lesson here. A teacher who has inspired the voices of people in seven different languages. And she continues to lift others up through her music, her mentorship, and leadership. Today, she serves as a senior director and strategist of the Partnership for BioAro Incorporated, chief growth officer for BioSports, and the director of the country's engagement for Nextvia, helping to shape the future in the health and longevity. Leela is proof that when purpose meets passion, miracles happen. And we're all about to hear her story. So let me tell you, just sit back, relax, and let's talk about the legacy, about her leadership, and her love right here on Talking with Kevin and Son. How you doing, Honorable Layla? How are you doing?
Oh, Kevin, it's such a pleasure to see you in person. I feel like we've gotten to know each other so well through our texts and conversations, and it's been a long time coming having this. And it's one of those beautiful things where we met online and got to chatting and, sort of got to know each other a little bit better. And I'm privileged to be part of your show and your platform. So thank you for having me.
It's funny. Most of my guests, featured guests on the show, are normally referrals from other guests that have been on the show. You're the first one that has ever reached out to me from, I think it was LinkedIn,
Yeah.
that you did. Why did you reach out to me of all the people that you could talk to? You're so important.
Well, I felt the same way about you. I thought that some of the platform, you have a really diverse group of guests. You're also a musician, you work in nonprofit, you do a lot of things for people. You're bolstering businesses. We're brothers and sisters. We live across this border and are so blessed to have each other as, as friends across this border between Canada and the United States. And my intention in reaching out was as governments change and we go through all of these things was to make sure that we're building bonds that go beyond government politics and all of that, and that diplomacy and discussion and conversation are the things that continue those relationships, and that despite what could happen in the ether of politics and all of that, that the relationships and friendships continue to grow despite political ideologies and all of that.
Yeah, and one of the things that I've always taught, the two conversations you did not want to have in social company is politics and religion. But
I'm
I
in
think
trouble then.
no, believe it or not, it's one of those things. I have had U.S. senators on my podcast because I personally knew them, and part of the reason why I had them on because I personally knew their story, and their
Yeah,
politics and their personal stories don't always align. I mean, I remember one senator here in Pennsylvania. I asked him. I said, you get voted in by the people,
yeah.
and I said, what happens to all the promises that you made to the people? And he says, and I don't know if I should mention his name anyway. He's no longer in office, but he did say, he says, you get elected and you're naive when you first get elected.
Yep.
And I'm going to ask you how your career started and your personal story. He says, but you spend your whole entire career fighting for an agenda that no one else wants to hear. You try to serve the people, but when you get into that seat, you're serving the people within the politics versus serving the people. And he says, if I've gotten 50% of the right for the people, he says, then I've exceeded expectations. He says most people in politics only represent 10% of why they got into the office and 90% of what it takes to stay in the office. So I don't know if politics in Canada is different because you've held some pretty high positions. But before we go through and talk about where you were, where you're at right now, I want the audience to get the chance to know you, how you came up, who inspired you, and what's your story.
Wow. It's it's so interesting to have these conversations. I'm one of those people that have always been interested in adult conversations. One of the things that you'll hear about if you talk to my family is that um and I grew up in that era. I'm 55, right? So we grew up in that era where it was, kids were to be seen and not heard and all these kinds of things. I didn't grow up in that situation. I grew up in a very um beautiful situation where there was a lot of adults around us and very, very intelligent, competent people that had time for a little girl with a lot of questions, and I've always been inquisitive and curious, and sometimes it's great, sometimes it gets me into a lot of trouble. But it was always welcome to have these discussions. And these were engineers and musicians and politicians and people that had sort of passed through my life. And what a huge privilege for me to have access to those folks.
Right.
So at a young age, I was canvassing for diabetes and heart. I think it was the Heart and Stroke Foundation. I was always door knocking for various things. So I got to know my community, my little community where I grew up, which is a farming community just straight east of the city of Calgary, which is one of our larger cities here in the province of Alberta. And it was a rural area back in the day, and I think I was the first person of color really out there of at least of South Asian descent. And so I grew up with Italians and Polish people and Germans and all these other really great Dutch, great farming community and lots of home baked foods. And you could literally walk into your neighbor's house because the doors were never closed. My best friend Terry Driuso, who lived across the street from me, his mom, Maria, would always we had a phone line back in the day. It was called a party line. So you didn't have your own line. So if somebody was talking on the phone, you had to push the little thing so it would give them a notice that somebody else needed to use the phone to switch the line. So Maria, if I was on the phone, and as teenagers, right, you're trying to drag the phone into a different room. She would come on the line and she would, Leela, you need to go across the street and punch down the bread. So I'd have to walk across the street and punch down the bread in her house because she was Italian and she had this beautiful, bread rising on her dryer. She always kept it on the dryer in her laundry room because it was warm in there. So I grew up with that level of trust and accountability because when you grow up in a community like that, everybody knows what you're doing. All the time we rode motorbikes and we're in with cattle and I worked, I babysat for everybody. I learned very early on that it was a very lucrative business to get into babysitting. So I would hop off the bus after school and babysit literally all the way walking home at various houses. And on the weekends, I had this one particular farm that had hired me. They had three kids of their own and then four other families. So I ended up with 9 or 10 kids that I'd be babysitting. And then we also had to clean out the barns and work with the animal. It was just the greatest the greatest way to grow up. And I think I was an early entrepreneur as a result of that. And I actually paid for my very first trip out of all of that babysitting money. And then I also worked on the local farms. I'm not a farmer, but we had local farms and they needed people to pick rocks and help out with hay baling and cleaning out the stalls. And so I got to help deliver a calf one year and which was really cool. And I was always working. I'm a small person, so I couldn't lift the heavy bales. So I did the smaller bales and I was like an awesome rock picker. That was like my claim to fame as a young person living out in the farms in the eastern part of Chestermere and the rural area surrounding. And then as a result of all of that and working on those farms, I got to know all of the local politicians because all of them were farmers or lived in this small town that I was in. So I door knocked for our local, well, we didn't have a mayor at that time because we weren't a city. So in those areas, they're called reeves, or they were called uh, like the counselors of that area. So I door knocked for them. Elaine Peake, who is a huge inspiration to me. She was one of the first women elected in our area, and I remember what a just a spitfire she was. Her husband had been mayor. And then she ran for council. In fact, one of the parks in our city now is Leela Lane Peak Park, and or John Peak Park actually is after her husband. But and she was just this gritty, amazing woman, and she dragged me everywhere with her. And I learned so much from her and the power of being at the doors and having conversations. And again, I was so blessed, Kevin, that these adults wanted to have conversations with this little girl. I just felt very blessed and I was activated very early on. And a real turning point for me in my youth was that I think I was 14 or 15, and in this area in Caroline, Alberta, there was an organization that started that's called Aryan Nations, and they're not connected to the KKK, but they have very similar roots as the KKK. And it was really starting to grow. And the fellow that was leading that group was really pushing anti-immigrant sentiments, the pure Christian lines, all of this kind of stuff. And I didn't really know much about it other than we were reading some of the things that were happening in the news. And I was at so in when you live in a rural area, when a new mall is built and is only like half an hour away, that's a really big deal. So we had gone to the mall for the day, and I was dropped off there, and there was this big rally that was going on in the parking lot there. And I was always joining in. I've been in protests and rallies since I was like 14. I've marched across my country a handful of times for everything from women's rights to immigration rights to, you can just imagine all of the things that I got myself involved in. So I walked over my little 15-year-old self and asking, what's going on? And this guy sort of looked at me and he goes, "Well, what's your background?" And I said, "Well, my dad is from India and my mom is from Saskatchewan, and he's like, "What do you mean your dad's from India and your mom's from Saskatchewan?" And of course, I laid into, my dad's from South India and married my mom and da 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 da, and going into all these things. And he said, "Well, you're an abomination." That was the first thing. And I looked at him and my young brain was just like trying to process what he had said. I'd never been spoken to like that before, right? And I remember saying to him, "Well, prove it." Right. And stupidly at the time gave him my mailing address because of course we didn't have emails or those sorts of things back then. And then they started sending me paraphernalia on how I had um, somehow destroyed the Christian white bloodline because of the marriage of my mother and my father, and that I was this abomination and that this was what was needed to happen. And so I spoke with my principal at my high school at that time. Um, and Mr. Thomas, who I'm still friends with, read some of these letters and he goes, "Leela, you should do a paper. Like you should write something about this and present it to the grade 10s and 11s in the lunchroom." So I put together this little project on, I didn't even really quite understand the word racism back in the day. Like I had to do a lot of research to kind of figure out what this actually was. And so I put this paper together and I presented it in front of the grade 10s and 11s, who are a very diverse group of Europeans and, different, version, first, second, third, and fourth generation farmers from the area. And it was my very first real motivated to advocating on behalf of the beautiful diversity that defines what Canada is, this tapestry similar to the United States. Where the only original peoples here are the Indigenous peoples, and we're so blessed to share this land with them. And then the rest of us are all, you know, we all came to this country to be able to find our futures. And so it was quite profound for me, that moment in my childhood. And I was on the Quebec exchange, so I went to Quebec for 3 months to learn French, and very different province in Quebec, very, very interesting, a very uh, different, very different from Alberta. I mean, we could spend like 14 hours talking about that, but I loved it, and I loved seeing my country, and came back even more stronger about my patriotism to my country, because in I think it was in 1982, Quebec had signed a Meech Lake Accord and was also talking about separating from the country. So the separatist mentality was very strong when I was there, and I had a lot of conversations with the separatists about how important Quebec was to me, and to the nation of our country, and to the sovereignty of our country. And so that started me on that pathway. So I had a lot of activism in my young life, and I think I was prepping myself, and I was a musician throughout all of that as well too. And I was very, very, I think that God, the universe, the creator, was very much preparing me for the future that I was going to have as a very vocal person in politics.
Well, believe it or not, oh boy, I had to take a back seat because um, I never thought that I would hear another human being say what you said today.
Hmm.
When we talk about the original people of your country and my country, they're one and the same.
Yes.
The American Indian, Indigenous people in Canada, they are the real people. I always say, how do you claim a land to discover brand new when there's already people there? Um, and the fact is, I've never heard anyone other than someone that looks like me ever have a conversation of racism and going up, and did not know there was another level in Canada of the KKK, and it's not kind, um, curious, or whatever the case may be, and whatever. It's the Ku Klux Klan. I mean, my mother marched with Dr. Martin Luther King. My fraternity brother, John Lewis, held the hand of another man that years after had he had forgiven after he had beaten him half to death while he was protesting for the rights for people such as myself. And to hear you, and when I had a conversation earlier with people saying I was interviewing someone that was part of the Canadian government, they said, why? And I said, one is because I've had personal conversation with this young person. And the other, I had some very good friends that are in Canada. And the picture that's being painted by our political officials of people that live in Canada, it's not a Rembrandt. It is not a Picasso, a De Gaulle, or anything else. It is graffiti. And I don't mean to offend any graffiti artists, because there's some excellent ones out there, but the story that we're being told is not true. And listening to your story and how your activism starts out young. Believe it or not, you've done the same thing that Dr. Martin Luther King and every other young person has done. Our countries, anytime that there has ever been change in this country, the protest was not for the old, but it was the change came because of the young. And I personally believe that the only people that are going to save this, if we can get our children to reprogram themselves away from their cell phone and all the apps and everything else, and take a good look at humanity, which you have done. So when I look at your resume and then I hear your story, you know, one of the things is that um, music is a connection between every race, every culture, every gender, and whatever the choice may be. And your music to ministry, you began as a singer and you're as a music teacher. You mentioned earlier, you're teaching several different languages and you owned your own studio.
Mhm.
How did your foundation of music and the arts influence your leadership and your approach? And how did you get into public service?
I get asked this question all the time. It's such a great question. So, Kevin, think about yourself as a musician. There's going to be people who love you and people who are like, meh, and others who will very much criticize. In our areas of music, there's a lot of experts, a lot of really beautiful musicians, and some will be super happy for you and help you with your career, and others may not feel the same way for whatever reason because of the competition. And then there's the critics. The one thing I know about as an artist, as a musician, is that we are always putting ourselves in front of people to ready to be critiqued. I think it's natural that we want that. We want that feedback, right? To be able to get better at what we do. And good criticism will get to the heart of what you're doing right and what you're doing wrong, but truly wants you to succeed, right? And it's not a criticism to destroy who you are or the person you are or the artist that you are. It really gets to heart. And those of us who've been in music our entire lives, I mean, you're criticized from everything to bangs to the lipstick. Well, maybe not you for you, but the lipstick that you're wearing to the clothes that you may present in classical music in particular, right? And you have to dress a certain way and you have to have a certain demeanor about you, and you can't like how you would maybe sing in folk or in R&B or something else where it's very emotive. If you're singing something from the Messiah in oratorio, that it's going to be a very sort of different lens that you approach that with. And you're looking to get the win if you're in a competition or to get really good feedback to become better. I think all of that, in all honesty, that really deep, like personal criticism about my voice, my vibrato, all those things that I may not be able to change, the way you look, whatever, all of that was makes politics look like a piece of cake. Like if you can handle the criticism, the overt, um, amount of information that you receive about a song or a tone or anything like that, you're ready for what politics will hand you, and it prepares you for that sort of toxic kind of space that you can be in, and or you can look at it as a piece of art in that you're constantly evolving and changing and reorganizing, and God willing, we're not so far set into our own ideologies and policies that we can't see when we're wrong or when we're doing something right or that another person has a better idea than us, you know? And songs, somebody was saying to you about your music, like, how do you keep coming up with all of these words? How do you keep coming up with these ideas? That's what politics is like. A, it's weaving language into policy. It's weaving, hopefully, if you're in it for the right reasons, a better opportunity, a way to look at things, and you have to take language and and work with it. And you'll have politicians that come on that do really good word salad, just like say something and sounds like a whole lot of something, but might not be a lot of anything. But the talk is good and it's very charming or whatever. But at the end of the day, you have to put policy down on paper. You have to be accountable for those things. It has to go through debate. It has to go through the processes of becoming the law. Those of us who are elected, it's like music, there's people who are gifted and there's those that can learn, and they all have their space in our sectors, right? Politics is like that too. You have people who are really gifted, who understand people, who are able to lead, and you have others that are there to push forward an ideology. And you've got to be, if you're going to be in leadership of any role, you've got to be able to, at some point, bring all of those folks together, regardless of whether you viscerally disagree with their point of view or you completely align. And music is like that too. Like, not everybody likes country, not everybody likes R&B, not everybody likes, folk music. But the thing that unites us as music lovers is that we appreciate the art form, right? And I think that very much translates into politics. Politics is the liberal arts, right? It is the ability to be able to talk through and come to a central position of what is in the best interest of the people that you serve, right? And it speaks a different love language if you're willing to take the time to do that.
Well, I'm going to tell you, I think everyone should be open to all type of music. I just got spent a weekend with Stevie Nicks, and I was only one. It was sold out. One of three black men that were there at the concert, and I love performers. And you put it very well. The position from music to taking an active role to being able to serve your community and your people. I mean, that's what I know. Our U.S. Constitution was set up for everyone to serve, but for some reason, we are so critical of life choices before we put our hats into the ring that it deters most people here to serve. And I don't know what you see when you look across the other side of politics in the United States versus what the United States claims they see in Canada. And, they claim that, Canadians are ripping us off, whatever. But what I do see, and I have problems with, is following a leader that doesn't know how to lead and being committed to a party for profit, regardless of how you personally feel. And I've had conversations with people that support this individual in public, but in private, they criticize this person, but they're doing it for the betterment of the party. And I think when everyone fights to win, they forget about the people that lose. So let me ask you this. I've got a bunch of questions I want to ask. Your first day as a new political figure, you had an agenda going on. Was politics everything you thought it was going to be? Or were you so naive that you were surprised when you found out there was a whole different world and a different master you had to serve? I don't know if I've said that right.
Perfect, actually. I was so naive. I had a humongous amount of what do you call that when you I was on a fire hose of learning, you know, and I had been given a very big position in the energy file, which I knew a little bit about, um but it was just so overwhelming and you know, I had imposter syndrome, massive amounts of imposter syndrome because elections are basically they're popularity contests. It's not necessarily the most competent or the best person for the job or any of that. I mean, the bar is so low sometimes for actually like what the person brings to the table versus, what you learn when you go there because you really, and to any politician or person who's thinking about going to politics, go with an open mind knowing that you're not going to know anything when you get there. And the best thing you can do is be open to learning from other people, but also keeping your critical thinking intact and ask lots of questions, be super inquisitive, make sure you understand the issues so I was in opposition at the beginning. So opposition does not have the funding that government does. So you're doing all of your research on your own and you're figuring all of the policy out on your own. You're just doing a ton of reading, at least if you're interested and you want to do right by the people that you serve. And the people that you're serving are not necessarily remotely interested in how that policy works. They're just wondering why you can't get it done. And it was like your friend who's the senator who said that is that, oh my goodness, if you could get 50% of the things done that you say you're going to do, that would be miraculous because the bureaucracy and the system is not set up for that. It's actually set up to fail in many respects. Um, and I say fail not as a bad thing. There's growth opportunity and failure, and you need to fail in order to understand why that piece of policy or whatever didn't work. But the system sets you up to look like you're a failure. That's where the problem is. The whole point of policy and debate is to get to the guts of why that piece of policy is good, bad, or otherwise, and to amend it and make it better for the people that you're serving. But instead, we point fingers at each other that, oh, well, you're incompetent and your legislation's not perfect. And well, you ask that question, it's like, well, if you have this past or this thing that you can't run, I don't know anybody who's perfect. I don't know anybody who doesn't have a past unless we catch them like when they're 14, and even then, we all know what a lot of kids are going through in both of our countries. And Canada has always viewed the United States as this beautiful strength of of people that we looked up to. We, at least as a younger person, that's what I always saw. I was always so excited about American TV shows and what you offered, and there was just so much more variety and things than what we had as Canadian. And we're a relatively new country with, you know, we're moving fast, but compared to the United States, we're quite new, you know, in the grand scheme of things. And but we always saw the patriotism of the United States as something really beautiful and something that personally that we would aspire to be like or work alongside. Canadians are collaborators. And so when things are said to us about like stealing money from people or taking something from the United States, it actually really hurts us at our core because we've never seen ourselves as anything other than really legitimate partners to a border that we respect and the people that we love and see as our brothers and sisters across that nation. We have humongous potential to be able to actually build together. And so when we're seen as less than, or that we are only worthy of becoming another state, or that, you know, the language that has been used, I laugh at it because I just think that it's a little bit ridiculous and it's a, you know, it's a tactic, right? To get you looking over here while something is going on over here. So I mean, I can take a joke and yeah, I can kind of giggle about it, but for a lot of people, what it actually did for us, Kevin, is that our country was really heavily ununified for a long time. No, none of us politicians, no matter where we sat ideologically, and I have tons of friends across the aisle in all of the other parties. So I sit in sort of in a conservative circle, but I'm a center right person. I'm a huge fiscal conservative. That's really a defining part of who I am. I have so many friends in the what would be your Democratic Party and the environmental parties and all that. Lots and lots of friends across the aisle, and I do lean on them a lot of times for wisdom too, to understand where they're coming from, so I can understand where my part is in all of this. And so I really appreciate the difficulty. I cannot imagine being the president of the United States of 325 million plus people. What a tremendous honor, the leader of the free world. We, I personally grew up believing how blessed I was to have you as my partner and as my neighbor. So when we hear things that we're, and again, I love graffiti, so I don't mean to use that in any negative way, but that we're somehow mispurposed or that we are stealing something from you or that in any way that we would have any nefarious thoughts towards the nation of the United States. Um, Canadians value this relationship. We value who you are. We value being able to visit and travel to see you. There's lots of things that need to be fixed. We'd have to have a whole other conversation about energy policy and lots of other things that would probably be in disagreement with your own elected officials, but it's a conversation that needs to happen. Um, we are dependent on each other, Kevin. There is no us versus you. There's no one better than the other. God willing, we feel that strongly about both of our nations that we feel like we are the best. That's the way it should be. I would think nothing less of anybody who thinks that their country is the very best country in the world. That's what you want to hear from people who live in that country or that nation. But diplomacy is at the heart of how we function as a global nation now, as a global economy. There is no escaping. There is no, I make this decision and you jump. It's not going to work that way. It might for a little bit, and there may be some opportunities. Like I have to say, while your president has made some very interesting commentary, some of the stuff that's going on in the Middle East right now and the discussions that are going on, we're watching that very closely, and he's made some very strong and I believe in the opportunities of having a two-state solution in the Middle East that no other president has been able to accomplish. So I don't know why that's happening or how, but you know, as an onlooker, I appreciate that very much because we want to see both Israel and Palestine be successful and be loved and have their nations be seen for the quality and the ability to have a safe home and all of the other nations that surround that area. Those are wishes I think all of us have had that live in relative peace where we are here. You know, we can't imagine what it's like to live in those places and what they must go through. So, you know, as difficult as some of the decisions have made, I really appreciate the United States and what they're doing right now and the ability to be able to go there and try and find peace. That's very important. So yeah, there's lots of things we could talk about, but
Yeah, I'm glad we're not talking about politics. But I do have to concur. I do agree with you. Out of all the things that I could say that he has not done, I do have to give credit where it's due. I am truly afraid about what's in the document when it says Project 2025. Um, I've heard stories about it. Matter of fact, I'm not going to lie. I've read it, and it's not good for people that look like me. It's not good for women in this country. It's not good for the poor in this country. And if we're that naive, we're going to be surprised that what's coming our way. But you put things so eloquently. I want to go to the matter of the reason why I have you on this podcast, and I appreciate you giving us an insight on the political insight of a person that went there from day one to serving, I think, in 2022 was your last act, I think, and you can correct me.
2023. Yeah.
Okay. I'm trying to keep my notes, my
Oh, that's okay. You're doing great.
all right. So if someone wanted to get in touch with you, I want to know how, if you want to give out your information, your Instagram or social media, if someone else wanted to interview and have you on the show, because now that I'm looking at it, I wish there was a global summit of all women like you that will get together and make a difference because right now the women that are in power in our country are following a blind leader. And I say this, and I'll say it 100 times over in both political parties. It is weakening the trust of people like me in our government, and it's almost, I would say, that organized crime is United States government. But that's just my personal feeling. So, but I want to find out how we get in touch with you. I want to talk about your ministry and your multicultural status and with women's group and how that initiative came about and have some fun with this conversation. So, how do we get in touch with you, Leila?
So the best way is through my email, which is all one word, which is events with Leela. It's really simple at outlook.com. So all one word, events with Leela at outlook.com. And it would be my privilege to talk about all the things that need to be talked about. I think, again, having these conversations, we don't have to agree. In fact, I would hope that we'll have lots of different opinions, but we have to talk. We have to sit and talk about this. We have to the only way to good policy is to really have these strong conversations and to not be offended by where we might sit on the spectrum of things everywhere from the left to the right. And I'm so tired of the left-right discussion, Kevin. I want to believe that people are generally good and that they want that their neighbors are healthy and happy and able to be successful as the next person. I want to believe that we can build businesses and have prosperity and all of that, but that we also think about those who may be vulnerable. And as a government, our responsibility is to take care of those who are vulnerable and to not keep them vulnerable. There's so many opportunities, but we have a lot of people who are also, and you know this as much as I do, who are in vulnerable spaces that there's no movement forward. And that's not just a government issue. It's not just an issue of any particular thing. It could be even the issue of the person. Lord knows it's very specific to that person. But the policies and the agendas that are coming forward seem to me to lack empathy. And you can do a lot of things if you start from a place of empathy, because
I
you just
totally
have to be
agree.
able to yeah, right. Like you're never going to make everybody happy. And when we're working on economic policy, which is where I really think governments belong, and so that economic policy is able to bring in what we need in order to be able to support the services that are required to take care of these beautiful folks that may be suffering at that time. And color and gender should have nothing to do with any of it. And it needs to be looked at from the perspective of the human. And I realize that's a large ask when we have these big populations, but if you start there, I think that ultimately you'll look at it from a different perspective. I don't mean to oversimplify, but that's the way I look at it.
Well, believe it or not, my point of view is a lot simpler than yours. I personally believe if everyone had opportunity and asset to the same opportunity, the same benefits and whatever, let at the end of the day, the person that has the opportunity to live where they want, to work where they want, have support where it's needed. I think if everyone had access to it and those that take advantage of it did something with it, the world would be in a better place. I think the key thing is opportunity, providing an opportunity to have everyone have equal access.
There's that, and there's also grit. You have to be willing to hustle and do the work. Nobody can do this for you. And if there's no grit and there's no hustle, there is no opportunity. And
I
that,
totally agree. And,
yeah,
and there are always going to be a handful of people that don't want to do the work that are going to get left behind. And that's why we pray. So let's go on.
yes, sir.
Champion women. Okay, you're the voice. As
Thank
a
you.
minister of culture and multiculturalism and the status for women, you led an initiative like Women's Entrepreneur Day and the Clare's Law. Um, what did those milestones teach you about the power of advocacy and allyship?
So it's interesting. The status of women was really important to me for a couple of different reasons. One of it was because I need my brothers to stand with me in order to be able to create a tsunami for growth.
Hmm.
Um, Women are 52% of the population. So there's no longer a question of what's going to happen in the world. And we have to be prepared for understanding that the words equality and equity mean nothing at all if we don't understand that the value proposition that any person brings to a situation has to come from merit and competency. Gender needs to come into the conversation simply because we are seeing continuously that situations around domestic violence and sexual assault. I mean, why is it still okay to hit a woman? Why is it still okay to feel that, that a woman's body is open to anybody's opportunity? Like these are the kinds of things that in 2025 should be obvious. We should be moving so far beyond that we're just working together, that it's obvious that we make a team, that representation is important. And it doesn't mean just putting women there. It means, like you said, the opportunity needs to be available. And then we have to also step in. And, you know, I have this amazing tribe of women that I have just been so blessed. And I actually just started a new organization called Women's Brain Trust. And the reason why I started it isn't to be like not having men involved in it, but because awards, and if you look at nominations for awards across at least our nation in Canada, the men have no problems putting themselves forward. They're so great at like being able to look at themselves and seeing their value proposition of what they bring. And part of that's history, right? And I think that's just wonderful. And so as women, we need to flood these opportunities with women's voices and women's competencies as well, too. So as opposed to being, anti-guy or saying that it's a man's world, well, a woman's world requires us to take that world and shape it and make it be something that we can work on together. I don't want it to be something that turns on itself and then suddenly we're anti-men. I have two beautiful sons. Like they're amazing. They're 27 and 28. They're great men. I raised great boys and my husband raised great men. These men are going to make a difference in the world, you know? So I don't want my sons to lack opportunity either. By the same token, the privileges of certain things that we keep taking for granted need to be talked about on a regular basis. And my brother, you, and all my other brothers in the world have to lead those discussions as much as we do. And the gaslighting has to stop. There has to be real change in things like around coercive control, in looking at every government is going to have a difference of opinion based on faith, based on background, on, how, I mean, that's a whole other discussion, what we should be doing with our medical care on, women's reproductive rights. There's lots of things that we could talk about, but fundamentally, in a free nation, we should be talking about those freedoms. We should be talking and making sure that those equivalencies are there. Whether you agree or not with where women's reproductive rights lie or don't lie, that is a really good debate and discussion to have. But at the forefront of that has to be the women's health and the children's health. And we've lost the original discussion between pro-life and pro-choice that used to happen was around the health care and the well-being of both of these things. It has completely lost. I mean, the discussion is just
So
lost.
glad you said that. I am
Yeah,
so glad you said that.
you
Uh,
know, we have to, I'm sorry, go ahead, Kevin. I didn't mean to interrupt
No,
you.
I was going to say, my grandfather always said, he says, if you want anything done, he said, put a woman in charge of it, it'll get done. And he said that he didn't never understood why men were ruling the world when women are the purpose, the reason why we have this world. Without women, this world would be nothing. And I have two beautiful daughters, and I will tell anyone that no human being, no man, no religion, whatever, has a right to govern over the decision of what my daughters do with their body, and let the decision lie within them and let them live with their whatever decision. It's not my right. I don't have a right. And a man should even be part of the conversation. And as far as healthcare is concerned, if you want to avoid famine and whatever, provide medical care equally to everyone. If our people had the same health care that our politicians have, we wouldn't have some of the issues that we have right now. So
Well,
I
we could
concur with everything you said.
we could probably have a whole show about universal health care and what the United States are doing. There's value propositions in both of those. There's some places where they work and don't work across both of our nations. It's definitely a valuable conversation that needs to be had at a much more granular level for sure.
We'll have that.
You
But
know,
but
yeah.
you involved in a couple of programs, BioSports. Let's talk about that program, and I want to find out. You have another an initiative, BioAro.
Yeah.
Um, you pick which one you want to lead in with and support with the other.
Sure. Well, the idea is that we want to democratize healthcare to this discussion, is that your data sovereignty and the importance over that and what is being able to be found out in your DNA should really be leading a lot of the discussions now. And, this is about having conversations with large pharma care companies, with looking at alternative medicines, with looking at how we run our systems, as it were, like the electronic medical systems and really as AI and large language models and blockchain and all of these things are really taking over our world, what does that mean for a person who's trying to protect their data and their information? And it's the fine balance, Kevin, of having protection over your data because you're a Mona Lisa. You are your only you. Your DNA is specifically only to you, and that is worth something that's valuable. But you also want to be able to share some of that information in order to make sure better medicines occur. Like if you look at if I was, suffering from a disease and I had, a person standing beside me of a different gender and different ethnicity, we might be given a very similar protocol because that's what is understood versus looking at our DNA, how our how our protein may absorb or metabolize a particular medicine. We see this in mental health. We're seeing this in endometriosis in women's, reproductive issues because endometriosis and painful periods and menstrual cramps have also always been considered an elective issue. I'll tell you, I have no control over the pain that happens in my body, when it takes over or during menopause. Like these are issues that are causing women to not be as productive as they could be. And it could be a real superpower if we understand it and we don't look at ourselves as just walking inflammations, right? And dealing with Tylenol. At my age now, the amount of Tylenol you have to take in order to maintain pain and all of that can really impact our livers, which again puts me into the healthcare system. So this is just a teeny tiny talk about what's available, but I really believe that we have to be at the front of the healthcare systems and what are going to change because in the next 5 to 10 years, it's going to shift so quickly under our feet, and we need to be having long and deep conversations about what we want done with our data, how we share that. If you have a really critical or interesting thing about you, how do you monetize that? Should you want to do that? How do you protect that data? How do you utilize that data to help out the world at large? A friend of mine who works in DNA was in a country in Africa. And that diaspora was really interesting because they were looking at sickle cell and some other interesting things that were really relevant to that particular culture. And the culture was very ancient, and you would thought that the diversity would be there, but there would be some sort of, baseline that was similar amongst a culture that had been alive that long. But the diversity was so rich and so deep that there was very, very difficult to come up with a baseline that would have helped out all of the people in this. So you really have to go to that granular level. So that's what I'm interested in. And then on the sports side of it, just takes it to that next level for our athletes to be able to take a really deep dive into their bodies and understand how they're functioning in the sport that they're in, why they're getting injuries, why are men dying from arteriosclerosis faster when they're coming out of a sports regimen than they may have of cancer, right? Like there's questions that need to be answered. How they're absorbing water, what supplements might be needed. If you're having a really bad day, you have a fight with your spouse, you're on your way to your game, what can you eat and what can you put into your body to get it in your game day so that you're part of the team, or if you're in a solo sport, to overcome things on a bad day from a mental health and from a, food, or I don't know, it could be 1,000 different things within your DNA, and also the epigenetics of that, which is really the questioning things, right? Those are your switches that flip off and on, whether or not you may or may not have this thing or that thing. It's really interesting. And I'm hoping that companies like the one that I'm advising at this point in time and that we're working with, that they'll really be able to help us educate ourselves. At the end of the day, the work that is being done is about advocacy. It's about agency, right? These are things that we're lacking in our systems right now that don't allow us to have the best information about ourselves and to be able to make better decisions.
All right. I would love to have your BioSports team on to talk about that because from a athlete's point of view, I do know there is certain populations that are immune to this certain things that we succumb to everyday life.
I'll
But
set that up for you with the head, the chief medical specialist, and our CEO. They'd love that.
I would love that to tell the story and promote it, especially because I know as an athlete, I'm going to say this publicly. I had an adverse reaction to the COVID vaccine that affected my heart. So
Wow.
that's documented. And, I know in social media you can't say that and whatever, but I didn't have any problems with my heart until after I had the vaccine. So I would love to sit there and have that conversation and see if we can bring this closer to being a reality and be a commonplace of finding out the answers because I think there are. Um, Cultures, races out there that are immune to some things that could help other people. I mean, I'm an advocacy for fighting for sickle cell with my good friend Junior from the Steve Harvey Show. We're doing a cruise next year to raise money for that. So, any
Nice.
any way I can help you or your team, I would just call me. I'm here. That's what I'm here for.
I'll connect you with all of the doctors and the really super smart people that are in this space that are really looking at a granular level of what the opportunity is. And we're looking for people who are doing, clinical studies and whatnot to be able, and we actually have our own sequencer right here in Alberta. So we protect your data, we curate it. We're not interested in selling your data, right? We want to make sure that you have it, that you know what you're doing with it. If you're an athlete, you might not want to share every aspect of what comes out of your consultation on your DNA, right? Like if you're a runner and your DNA says you should be a weightlifter, then it's not that you shouldn't be a runner. It just means that your body is going to react differently and may have injuries that a person who's built and has the DNA of a weightlifter would have, right? So those are really important conversations. And again, it's not to tell a person not to do a sport because grit and determination are 90% of why people are as good in their sport as they are, right? And so we don't want to take away from that. But at the same time, if you know your body a little bit more intimately and you understand how to advocate for yourself, if you know that on a particular day you've had a really good run the day before, but that your body actually needs to rest the next day and you need to do yoga, and that's what you should be doing the next day or be in the pool, and that's actually going to help your muscles recover from that big run that you had, or if you did some heavy duty weightlifting and you got some tears that are going to need a few days to recover, we need to know that from body to body. And we can't just assume that the same workout is going to work for a person. Or, you see about men's hearts all the time in sports, that they're on the field and they suddenly just drop dead. It happens more often than we like to think. There's also really a huge impact around after your sport is done too. You hit a cliff, you're this famous person, right? You're go, 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 go. And maybe you're lucky you have a business you can go to and all that, but you're not going to be exercising at the same level you were at your peak. So what does that mean for your DNA? What does that mean for your body? What do we need to look at to keep you the most healthy and vital, as you can be as you're coming out of your sport, or if you're young and you're going into your sport, so we don't destroy your muscles and have, really like, I mean, career-ending injuries before you even get started. So these are all things that it's not just us who are working on this. There's lots of companies who are doing it. It's really interesting.
It's funny that you say with athletes post after their career has
Mhm.
ended. Most of these athletes, if you meet them 10 years later, you would not recognize them because they do not look like the same athlete that you saw when they were healthy and fit. And many conversations that I've had with those individuals is that the one part about their sport and their success in their sport, they hated the work, the intensity 24/7 of working out that way. And it can't be maintained in a regular everyday life. But I'm
Yeah.
also looking at the fact that in 2026, your country, my country, and the rest of the world will come together for the Winter Olympics hosted by the Snoop, D-O,
That's
double G
great.
Dog, which probably is going to be the most exciting Olympics ever. And I cannot wait for politics to be out of sports because I think sports is the answer, and we should cure all of our problems by that. But I look forward to U.S. and Canada in skating. I look forward to U.S. Canada in the luge and the bobsled. I look forward to, and I know you do, U.S. And Canada in hockey, both men and women. What are you looking forward to in the next coming Olympics?
So I've become a huge fan. I've always been a fan of speed skating. One of our athletes who's has a very beautiful story about his history with us and what he learned from this. His name is Hayden Meyer. He's qualifying right now for the Olympics. And it's really, really interesting to see these athletes. And then we're working with the bobsled teams actually right now. And I should have some of those folks come on and talk to you as well too. Oh my gosh,
Good.
these kids, oh, they're like one of them, his name is Kenny. He's just the sweetest, beautiful young man I've ever met. I just love him. And I'm actually going to be working in the next little while from the nonprofit sector to try and see how we can help raise money for our athletes so they can actually get to the qualifying rounds because so many of our athletes don't even make it, not because they're not talented, but they just don't have the money or the sponsorship to make it to those qualifying rounds so they can become Olympians. And so these kids are just they're out there working 4 jobs and then they're training and they're just so I have a huge affinity now for bobsled because I've met so many of the athletes from there. Do you know Nick Lewis? Nick Lewis is from Texas. He played for the Montreal Alouettes and then he also played for the CFL and the sorry, so he played for the Canadian Football League as well at the Montreal, and he also played for Calgary. And so he's on our team as well too. He's one of the best people you will ever meet. He's got an organization right now called AO Sports where he has these channels where athletes can actually monetize the great things that they're doing through social media to help raise money in an entrepreneurial side of things. Oh my gosh, this guy is just, you have to talk to him. He's
Bring him
just
on.
beautiful.
Oh, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but bring him on.
I will. I'll text you after all of this and I'll send you all of their information so we can set up a few more of these because they're really intuitive and they're beautiful people and they're giving back into their communities. And it just makes me very proud to know them, not just as like these elite athletes, but also as the human beings that they are. They really, that those are our heroes, right? This is our kids aspire to be like these people, like they aspire to be like Snoop Dogg and rock stars and all these other things. Music and sport is what we remember in our lifetime. On our deathbed, we're not remembering the mark we got on our math test. We're remembering the song we sang to our husband or our wife or the sport, that goal that you shot that was just, those are the things that we remember as we age and they're beautiful memories and our athletes are the ones that are giving us this incredible they're sacrificing their bodies for our entertainment and we're so grateful to the work that they put in and who they are as human beings, especially these really great people. So make me
And,
very happy to elevate them
we
all.
should have a private platform in order for them to recognize, and we should know every last one of their stories because they give up so much for us to celebrate that evening, that night, to see them stand on the podium. We look at the agony of defeat of how people's 4 years of training, sacrificing, comes to an end by an injury, a false start, or whatever the circumstances may be,
Quarter
catching a
of a second. Quarter of a
yep,
second.
quarter of a
Yeah.
second. And we
Yeah.
should tell those stories. And we should, as human beings all across this world, figure out a way to financially support all of these athletes and give a kid a chance. I mean,
Oh,
there's enough corporations around this world
there is.
that every opportunity, every athlete that needs an opportunity can afford training, the nutrition, and everything else in order to represent their country.
Yeah, we're going to do that though. That is that for me, the one of the reasons I join with organizations like this isn't just because of the science. That's part of it, but I'm not a scientist, but I'm an advocate. And I believe in this. I believe that if we can do brand recognition and we can work with some of the larger branding agents, like some of the folks that you were talking about, and then match their dollars and get dollar for dollar put into these situations to really help these young athletes or even young musicians, anybody who's really looking at they're changing their world around them, right? They're doing these amazing things, and it might be the difference of a couple $1,000s that makes the difference as to whether or not they go forward or not. And if they have the grit and the hustle to make it work, I'd be the first person saying, okay, come on, let's focus on this, and we're going to do that. I have no doubt in my mind that with the right discussions and the right people at the table, we can find lots of these corporations have social dollars that they want to put into things. They're just looking for organizations and people to come by and show them how this money is going to work for them, if they can brand alongside, whatever it is. There's lots of ways we can do that. We just got to talk to the right people. I'm absolutely committed to this.
Let's do it. Let's do it. Let's do it. And I'm going to tell you, Layla, Leela, use my platform to
Oh,
support everything you're doing. There's multi layers of what you're doing. Before I talk about your legacy and purpose, I want to again let people know how to reach out to you. I'm going to ask you, why haven't you written a book yet? Which you probably have. We'll
I'm
talk about
actually
that.
working on one right now.
All right.
Wait, I
So,
don't know if it'll just be for me or for the world, but you got to get this stuff out for sure.
all right. First, how do we get in touch with you?
So best way is through Events with Leela is my email. So it's all one word, events with Leela at outlook.com. Or actually, I was thinking on LinkedIn as well too. I mean, that's how I met you, my brother. I love meeting people on LinkedIn. I'm interested in all of your stories, but I want to talk to government officials and others to see how we can work across party lines, across borders to really build the strength of both of our countries. If the USA is successful, then Canada is successful, and vice versa is true. And so I want nothing more than for your country to have immense success and to see, the growth of what is possible and to reflect that in our own country and to, that our various personalities work in collaboration versus against each other. I'm very proud of our Prime Minister right now, Mr. Mark Carney. I think he's doing a great job in managing all of this. So we're really proud of him. And so I'm hoping that our leaders can all work together to find what is in the best interest of both of us and that those collaborations. So anybody who's interested in talking about that, I have a few calls into some of the chiefs of staff of the state of California and a few others. So I'm hoping to have conversations with them about not only DNA and the work that we're doing in BioSport, but also I'm working on bilateral trade agreements between India and Africa, the West Africa and Canada right now. And we'd love to, have bilateral discussions with the United States here. There's already lots, but there's always room for more discussions. So yeah, very interested in all that.
Collaboration. Collaboration is definitely king and queen.
Yeah.
Well, I don't want to end the show yet, but I want to talk about this book. Title for the book yet?
Not yet. We've been kind of playing around with it. We're sort of going through the process of figuring out, a person's life is so full. There's a book in every single human being. And you
True.
kind of have to pull out that thing that may help somebody or not help, whatever it is, whatever the discussion is. I just did a TEDx talk on the weekend, and it was all about democracy and voting. We just had a municipal election, and only 38.9% of our population showed up to vote. It just makes me sick to my stomach. So for me, getting people excited and engaged and participating in this beautiful thing that we have called democracy is such I fight for it every single day, Kevin, and I will continue to fight for that beautiful process. We have so much hope in our countries because despite who our leaders might be today, they're not going to be the leaders 4 or 5 years from now. We're going to have other people, and we have to help prepare them, and we have to engage, and we have to participate. If we're not participating, we cannot have a voice at the table. You have to be willing to put yourself out there, even if voting is the only thing that you do. That has to be it. I mean, United States, what you guys had, what, 68% of your population show to vote? I can't remember what your
Yeah.
numbers were exactly. Your youth vote was up compared to us. We only 40% of people between the ages of 18 and 24 in our last federal election came out to vote. So then youth issues go to the bottom. If you're a multicultural person and you're coming from, an ethnic community, I mean, both of our countries now are majorities of minorities, right? Like, so these minority groups have so much power should they choose to come forward and use that strength of being both American or Canadian and this other great thing that defines them to help build their countries. But if they're not coming forward to vote, their issues disappear. If you have affordability issues and your family is struggling, you don't come out and vote, then affordability goes to the bottom of the list. Like, politicians don't just count votes, they look at who showed up and they're paying attention. So we as a public that have people that died for our right to vote, that died for women to be considered persons under the law, like we have to show up. And so the book that I will write will be around that passion and that desire to make sure that democracy lives and thrives in these countries that have fought and died for that right. And I'm just not willing to give that up in any time soon.
All right, so we're announcing on Talking with Kevin and Son the pre-sale of Layla's book. Uh, so I'm excited. I can't wait, and I'm as a personal friend, I'm gonna keep poking you to get it done
I will,
because
I promise.
tomorrow's not guaranteed for any of us, and I'm hoping we're connecting the dots not only to our two countries, but to the conversations that we need to have. And sometimes the conversations are uncomfortable. And I would say if it's uncomfortable for you, pay attention because you need to listen and acknowledge the conversations that's being had is true, especially with the struggle with our youth, the struggle with our healthcare, the struggle with our women and what they go through, and the struggle with us just basically working together. So when I speak on legacy and purpose, and when you look back on your journey as a mother, and I believe it or not, your husband and both of your sons are going to be upset because you didn't even name them. You said you had a husband. You said you had two sons, but
Yeah.
I think you named both of them. And your husband said, "I do" to someone that he knows you. So this is a good time to go ahead and acknowledge your wonderful husband, your two wonderful sons, and then you as an artist and as a change maker. I'm going to ask you this: what legacy do you hope to leave for the next generation, especially for young women who are going to listen to you and look up to you?
It's actually great that we're ending with this. So my husband Malkeet and my eldest Akesh and my younger son Sharon. My youngest son is autistic, and we have been advocates in this space for a very long time. And he's just a brilliant, amazing kid. He's broken every barrier that's ever been put in front of him. And both of my sons, both Akesh and Sharon, are phenomenal singers. My son is in the opera, but he also sings in musical theater. And then the other one is in a show choir group that has just changed his life, the Youth Singers of Calgary. It's just one of the most incredible organizations. And my husband is my favorite person in the whole world. He and I have been married for 31 years. He's a recovering alcoholic and he's 8 years sober. And now I've always had the platform to talk, but I've been dragging him into all of this. And so, as an ethnic Indian man, he has been able to reach people that somebody like me could never reach because of the stigma and the fear. And so, having worked through all of those things and the strength of our marriage and our friendship has grown immensely because of the work that he was willing to do. I didn't know at the time if we were going to survive, but he chose to live instead of dying by this horrible, horrible disease. And the legacy that all of the things that you get to do in your life, Kevin, is just gravy compared to your kids. The legacy for me is to leave behind a world that believes that children are valuable. And it doesn't mean you have to have them. It doesn't mean you have to even like them. But the more that we separate ourselves from the chaos of little ones running around our knees, and the integral part of wanting to make the world better is having young people in your life. That is where we get our motivation from. We want to take care of our elders, the dignity of all of that. That's all important. But our children is what we leave all of this behind to, good, bad, or otherwise. And the legacy for all of us, and myself included, are my children. I know that my kids are beautiful men. I know that they're going to give back into this world in a way that I can't and I won't, and they'll understand it differently than I do. And I'm so proud of that. And out of all of the things that I've done right in my life, those two young men are they're it. They're my why. They're why I got into politics. They're why I advocate. They're why I'm a strong woman, because I have these three incredible men that back me up every single day of my life. So,
All right, all right. I normally ask a question, and people are probably bored with me asking this question about your ask, but I'm going to change up a little bit because you're that special of a person. Because I know you personally, and we have some things in common of our backstory. I'm going to ask you because you have a great voice. All right. People don't know that. I mean, not only do you teach singing, you produced and everything else. If you could sing one song that perfectly captures your outlook on your life today, what will it be and why?
there's a folk song called "The Parting Glass," and it's an old Scottish song, but was kind of taken up by the Irish. And it talks about all of the things that you do in your life. The words are, um, of all the money that e'er I spent it in great company. And of all the harm that e'er I've done, alas, it was to none but me. And all I want, for want of wit, to memory now I can recall. So fill to me the parting glass. Good night and joy be with you all.
That was perfect. That was perfect. Thank you. Um, Leela, I want to thank you for coming on the show. There's an open seat for you. Come on anytime. I do want to extend the invitation to your husband every uh, end of November and December. I talk about men's mental health because the suicide rate goes up with men, especially men of minority. So I would love to have your husband on the show. Maybe we will save someone's life and open the window of a door to someone that's sitting in the dark, contemplating the worst in life. So you are always welcome. You gave us so much information. And I want to say this before we close to the people that are listening to this. You know, the conversation we had today with like Miss the Honorable Leela Sharon, Aheer, is about leadership that's rooted in compassion. She reminds us of what true leadership isn't about the title of power. It's about service, empathy, and using your voice, even if you're singing to uplift others. You know, we talked about the true power of purpose, you know, from a journey from music to teacher to government to minister of global strategies. She shows us that purpose involved um, brings about a passion that remains and fuels us to work within a system that has to be anchored by love. It leaves us a legacy that's far behind any times or anything that we do. The one thing that I've learned about the conversation, both here today and in the past, okay, her courage stands alone, whether it's in the politics or her life. Courage means standing up firm for what you believe is right, even when it's uncomfortable and unpopular. Leela's example proves that integrity is the backbone of lasting influence. Women leading the way, like my grandfather said, if you want something done, put it in the hands of a woman. All right. We need to empower them. We need to protect them. Okay. Leela shows us that equality isn't just for policy, it's for humanity. Her story engages women everywhere around the world to own their own power and to have their own voice. She has a global vision. She has a heart. And from the work that she's done in the healthcare industry and her lifelong commitment to her community, my guest today, Layla, Leela, demonstrates the impact of being where you are and where you stand. Change starts small and then it ripples outwards. Um, my good friend, I want to thank you for coming on this show. I want to thank my sponsors, the borough at 159 Lancaster Avenue in Downingtown, JT, Keith, and my son Theo. If you get a chance to go visit, go down to the borough on 149 Lancaster Avenue in Downingtown, PA. Layla, you are welcome to come back anytime. Do you want to leave our listeners with anything before we sign off?
Just to have faith and believe and advocate. Don't ever think for one moment that you're not powerful. That power is there and it is worthy and it is what will define the future for all of us. So please feel empowered. And I hope that our beautiful discussion today shows you that all of the things that we've talked about are possible for every single one of us, and that power is within us. And I encourage all of you to use that and to share, and so that we can let's keep this tsunami of growth and joy happening.
That's good. So, what a powerful conversation we've had today with the Honorable Leela Sharon Aheer, a woman whose life reminds us that leadership is service and service is love in action. My grandfather said that when you get to a place in life that you can help someone else out, he said it's your duty to do so. He said, reach one, teach one. And with that said, before I say it, if you want to know more information, go to our RMK Productions and Network on our YouTube page. You can like, comment, or do whatever you like. I'm just happy you came to the show. My name is Kevin McLemore. You have just witnessed a conversation that needs to be had on Talking with Kevin and Son. Until the next time, we'll fade to black and we're out.